was
Hello and welcome to the Real Estate Macro Podcast. I am your host, Douglas Dow. Joining me today is my good friend and all around interesting guy, Moshe Orange. Moshe, welcome to the call.
Thank you so much for having me.
And Moshe, just for folks that don't know you, how did you get here today?
So just a little bit about myself. Up till 2017, I used to work as a bankruptcy attorney back in Israel. In 2017, my wife and I relocated. We moved here, started working as a commercial mortgage broker. At first as a hard money lender, later on as a commercial mortgage broker with the group I am until today. Starting this business, coming into the business was a very difficult time and period for myself. Looking back right now, 4 years, just a little bit of a closing circle for me because last midterms was a little bit different than I was expecting it when I first came to America.
Mm-hmm.
We might go into that deeper later on in the hour.
For sure.
Yeah, so that was kind of an interesting transition from working with the unsuccessful and trying to live the American dream after moving here.
And for those who don't know, typically it can be like an all commission type position, right? Where it's just like feast or famine.
Again, sorry.
The commercial mortgage brokerage can be like generally, I guess it varies with who you're talking to, but sometimes can just be 100% commission oriented. So it's like, all feast or famine in terms of.
That is correct. What we kill is what we eat in general. Me, myself, when I started out as a hard money lender, I just preferred not to have as much pressure on myself. So I even preferred not to get any draws. Just what I kill is what I eat, which that did start a cold winter of 2017 and later on moved on to 2018 because it did take some time until, got up on the wave and started doing some business closing deals. Interestingly enough, just to go a little back in history, 2018 was a little bit of a difficult time for myself just because I was closing very small deals. Started out with a client in Philadelphia, was pushing my boss to agree to a $75,000 loan, which he finally agreed to. Now this is almost 4 years that I'm providing him with construction loans. In the beginning, we started with hard money. Today, we're dealing already with banks, larger institutions, cheaper money than I used to provide him. And yeah, looking to close a few of his deals in the first quarter of next year. So that's quite a run. The reason I was bringing up the midterms before was just because you and I, we had a little bit of a conversation before this podcast on one of the meetups. And I was telling you about the way I have started. So I remember very clearly the night of the midterms of 2018. I was debating myself if I should drive back from Philadelphia to Rockland County, New York, just because I did not have enough money to get back the following day to Philly. And I did have a few meetings set up for that day. I was told by that lender I was working for that if I spent some money on a hotel, I'll be reimbursed. So I swiped my first credit card. That did not go through. I swiped the second, the third, and the fourth. That also didn't go through.
Wow.
So I was quite stressed out. in the end, I decided I'll sleep in the car.
Mm.
That night, I remember listening to the news. It was the midterms. Um, it was snowing in Philadelphia
Oh,
that
wow.
night, so it was really freezing. And just with time, we were able to climb up and reach that ladder and start to climb the American dream. So it did go hard in the beginning, and with time, if you're really dedicated towards what you really want to do and you have a passion of doing it, you'll be able to reach the next level.
That's really compelling. And Moshe, I'm just really curious. You were, bankruptcy lawyer, Israel. Everything's pretty much okay. Our life is okay. What what motivated you to chase that American dream? Because it really feels like you took some major changes to even really achieve what you did.
Right. So interestingly enough, in in Israel, lawyers don't. uh, In Israel, there is a saying that divides between two kinds of lawyers:
Hmm.
the ones who don't have what to eat, and the ones who don't have time to eat. To that extent,
Yeah.
and because I was working for a small firm, the pay I was making then was pretty much similar to minimum wage.
Hmm.
So I was working as an attorney in the morning and was delivering burgers at night. Um, I know for Americans that sounds a little bit bizarre, a little bit different. Over here, people are used to that lawyers make much more money.
Mm.
Back in Israel, that's not always the case. So
Yeah, I would
working
argue
hard,
it's not necessarily the case here in the States either. Depending on your situation, there are some really successful attorneys, but boy, if you went to a less than top 25 law school and you're just in some podunk town, they might be delivering Uber Eats at night as well. So that's not necessarily. I think there is a misperception that every lawyer is just swimming in cash, and that's just not the case.
interesting.
Yeah.
Yes, I do. I do remember, from that, pretty much from those days, I've been working very hard. Um, I think you can relate to that because if I remember correctly, you told me that you're also a bankruptcy attorney in
I
trade.
did practice bankruptcy law back in the day. Been there, done
So
that, nailed it shut.
you're
Yeah.
always nervous on that balance. You don't want to be where
Oof.
the other you don't want to be filing bankruptcy as well.
Right.
So you just work your ass off until you make it.
Yeah.
And you know, I came here to America. I felt like it's I could do it just because there is the option to. This is
Hmm.
a capitalistic society and environment where if you really hustle your way through, you could make it happen. Um, so you just have to fight and climb your way out.
And most, what really like kept you going, or like in this process where things weren't always going well, how did you keep your optimism and focus? What kept you motivated, I guess is the right word, for or not getting discouraged along the way?
So I think a lot of that credit has to go to my wife. She was always telling me that I can do better. But yeah, the just never giving up and the want to survive at all times and thrive. Life has a deeper meaning to it, in my opinion. You don't want to exist, but you want to live life,
Mm.
and you want to make the most out of it. It is, I'm in a profession today in financing, which I really love what I do, and I do what I love, and I feel very privileged in having that opportunity. Um, I see myself sometimes coming into the office not really believing that I get paid for doing something that is between a hobby and a real job.
Right. And you actually get paid to do something you're just having a lot of fun doing. You're talking to people about real estate all day long, and it's
Right. So I remember as a kid always watching the NBA players and coaches always saying that this is what they were born to do and they love what
mm,
they do and they do what they love. And I was like, wow, if I only was able to find that profession that um, I can do what I really like, that would be awesome. Interestingly enough, my first job here was selling vinyl flooring,
mm,
and I was renting some office space um, from this guy who later on told me, I just like the way you do sales.
mm,
Maybe you should come work for me selling hard money.
hmm,
And that's what I did. It did take time, um, but you know, once you climbed up the ladder, it was it was just to reach the sky. The sky was the limit. And interestingly enough, last week I was at a conference in Miami, and I was seeing a lot of um, bitter guys just because right now nothing is really working out. Yeah,
mm,
I see it also on my own career. A lot of my deals are falling apart
mm,
just because rates and the uncertainty in the market and equity groups are pulling out and debt groups are not doing as much deals. And a lot of people in my profession who I met down there were saying, right now there's not a real opportunity out there. And you can see it that way, which is a legit way to see it and where we stand today. But on the other hand, you can look at it, and I saw COVID as the same experience, back in the day when in March of 2020, when all the banks have shut down. I felt like that was a real good opportunity for myself just because everybody has a lot of time and nothing is happening in the market. So the people who I was always trying to get my foot in the door never had the time to sit around with me. They all had their brokers, they all had everyone with them, and suddenly their brokers were failing to deliver,
mm,
not in the broker's fault, obviously, but suddenly you get a real chance of getting deals done because people give you the time to sit with them. They're bored at home, doing meetings through Zoom, and you get a real opportunity suddenly. I see the same thing is happening right now. People I've been chasing for quite a while to get their business um, never had really time to sit around with me just because the last 2 years in the real estate world was everybody was busy underwriting, and nobody had the time to speak to mortgage brokers. And right now, since everything is very slow, they have the time to do so. And if you come in optimistic and you know that you can get deals closed even in difficult times, and you're able to give that certainty to your clients, that's all what they want to hear this time. They want to hear some perspective, just, to hear what their banker thinks about what's going on right now, to get a little bit more energy in the room um, in these challenging times. So to myself, I see this as a great opportunity just to go out there and chase and make deals happen.
Isn't that interesting how that mindset shift between, every down cycle is an opportunity? And I feel the same way. I completely agree. It's like for developers, typically land goes on sale around now, this time of year, this time of the cycle, I should say. So in this type of the cycle, pretty soon land is going to go. It's typically it reacts more. It's more elastic than regular asset classes that cash flow. So in a recession, dirt becomes a lot cheaper than it is during a really hot market. So I myself am very excited for that reason, but I really appreciate your mindset shift. It's like, well, this is, when at this conference, everybody's crying in their beer about, oh, it's a, I hate to say it, but it's a bit of a victim mentality. And I admire that you take on the opposite approach. It's like your opportunity to expand and attack. And it seems like that's when you see real wins from a down cycle.
Well, you don't have to be a genius to go into this mindset. You see the same cycle happen. There is the changes today between today and 2008, but also back then, brokers who were able to close deals then became really successful with time because their sponsors just got the feeling and the understanding that only this guy in difficult times, in easy times, you go to Freddie, Fannie, you get a regular bridge loan, whatever that is, very easy to deliver. In these challenging times, if you're really assertive and you really push, you could get it done. And if you do, you're really on top of the world. And they know that this is the time where you can really deliver and get your clients' trust. And if they feel like you can execute and get the deal in the books, that creates certainty and that creates a good relationship. And later on, the new brokers that come in will have to wait for their turn to hit that cycle. So, yeah, there's always two sides of the coin. It is easier to do deals when all the economy's good and whatever. It is a little bit more challenging at this time, but it is possible, and you have to go with the right mindset and just to make things happen. That's the only option we have to close the deal. There's no other options. There's no other solutions.
And Moshe, how do you see people responding to the changes in the environment? What are deals that are getting done right now, and how is that working?
So you are seeing less leverage, higher rates. If we have seen, 100 lenders, I'm exaggerating, of course, but if you saw a large amount of lenders responding to every deal in a positive way, right now it's a lot fewer lenders that are willing to do every deal. So the feedback you get is slower feedback. It takes a little bit more time to get everyone on board and at every lender. But yeah, deals are still getting closed and we're still making it happen. People who will stay aggressive this time will be able to make it big on the flip side. So that's the opportunity out there currently. I do think also we're going into a very interesting time in the first and second quarter of 23 when loans start maturing, bridge loans start maturing, and people have to refinance. And because margins were so tight in the last 2 years, it is sponsors did underwrite deals and tighter margins. And if they were talking about a 4.5 takeout on a conservative underwriting, they're going to be very surprised when prime rate right now is 7%, and it'll be just more challenging for them.
It might literally be double the rate that they had exited on, right? Than another pro forma.
That not yet to a double, because if they did underwrite at a 4.5% on a conservative end, because we have to remember rates were the high twos, low mid threes, so they underwrote at 4.5, 4.75 takeout, which in those days made sense because you weren't able to get better deals those days. Right now, if a sponsor did 5 deals simultaneously at a $25 million on a $25 million deal size, right now he would have to cough up money, and a lot of it to get it refinanced. Just because he cannot cash out, he would have to cash in.
Mm-hmm.
And the question is, A, is the lender willing to work with him? And B, if his LP investors are willing to work with him as well. If
Mm-hmm.
one of them gets nervous and things start shaking a little bit, that can be very stressing. So for him, for that kind of sponsor, that can be very stressing. On the other hand, some other sponsors who are waiting on the lines, warming up right now, getting their money put together, their equity put together for those deals, it does seem like they are about to come. Exactly.
Yeah, that's all I can say about that. I'm just I'm in the second group. We are really foreseeing. Yeah, I hate to be brutal about it, but it feels like there's going to be some forced selling going on pretty soon. I don't see any way around it.
I strongly agree. I think right now it's interesting because today I had someone who gave me a call and he told me he's looking for about $700,000 loan for a fix and flip on a property he's doing. And right away, I told him I'm not sure I'm the right mortgage broker for that particular asset class, just because, you know, let's say even he's purchasing it for 50% LTV, which would combine the construction budget to it as well. If prime continues on being 7%, which that is most likely, and we might even go higher on prime in another 75 basis points in the near future, that means that if the property is worth, let's say, $1 million now, nobody can pay that kind of mortgage with that kind of rate. 7% rate on $1 million, that's literally hard money of what we have known for until very recently. So unless Rich Pa or Ma purchases for you that property cash, then nobody will be purchasing those kind of assets.
Yeah, it just feels like this is a really challenging time for the fix and flip market because the pricing is against them. So pricing is coming down in terms of assets, in terms of like if they flip the property, their exit is coming down. Their interest rate's going way up. So it feels like that's just an uncomfortable market to be in right now.
That is I strongly would agree with you on that. I have a client that I spoke to today. Last year, him and we have closed several deals. This year, we did not, since interest rates went up, he did not do any other deals.
Went ahead and went pencils down to wait for things to shake out a little bit, sounds like.
Right. And I, have another client who did, who built condos in Brooklyn. Right now, he's having a strong challenge. He cannot sell the condos. And he has to refinance the bridge loan. The problem is that the SCR with this kind of rate does not support that kind of those amount of funds. So he also, for his property, I don't remember the exact amount of condos he has in that building, but it just doesn't support. It doesn't make any sense for any lender. So he would also have to cough up some cash.
Do you feel like there's an opportunity for mezzanine players with an entrepreneurial mindset to come in these deals and recapitalize some of these, or is that just the number so brutal it doesn't feel like that's going to be any kind of solution?
So that's a very interesting question. I was asked that a lot. I think that would be determined mostly by the strength of the sponsor,
Mm-hmm.
um, because nobody really knows where the market is going.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, the bottom line is these equity groups, the first thing they want to be certain of that they'll be paid off at full. The second thing is they want to hit their returns.
Mm-hmm.
So if they feel like they can hit their returns, most likely they will do the deal, wait for 2, 3 years until things sharpen up. But if that, we were just seeing what happened when you don't have liquidity with one of the largest Bitcoin here, I cannot remember, FTX, I
FTX, yeah,
mean,
that was, oh man, brutal.
that's that is brutal. A lot of net worth was disappeared, and the reason for that was a lack of liquidity. If you
Mm-hmm.
don't have liquid, it ain't going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's the way these equity groups are looking at it currently. I think there's not a real straight answer to that yet. Um, we'll have to see how things shape out.
And Moshe, when it comes to the differences between, shift gears a little bit and talk about policy, if you don't mind, I'm very fascinated to see, where do you see this interest rate market going? Do you feel like they're going to kind of go up and then right back down, or is it going to stay fairly high for the next year or two, based on what you're seeing?
That's a very interesting question. Um, and I think that it has to do a lot with politics without really going into politics, right or wrong, or left or right. Um, but just bringing out a few facts. I think right now the crisis, I do check markets around the world.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the interesting things that I am currently seeing is the world is suffering from a lack of energy.
Mm-hmm.
And when that lack of energy, we're seeing that lack of energy play out in inflation around the world. So if inflation is just based on that, no, I'm not sure about that, but that is a massive factor on what's going on in the world currently. And right now the US is not really getting energy here at home. They cannot purchase energy from Iran because of sanctions, or Venezuela due to sanctions. Right now, also Russia is not providing the world. So the U.S. is pretty much relying only on OPEC, and um, their minister um, of energy was saying that it will take for them time to pump out more energy. Um, so based on that, I don't see, if the policy does not change regarding energy, I don't see how inflation will really be under control, just because everything that's delivered to our homes, even in Amazon, everything's delivered based on energy. Um, it sure will be an interesting winter, just because the demand for energy is more aggressive during winter time. So I don't really see any big change of interest rates until they start figuring that out.
And it feels like the energy supply problem is really tough because of the current situation with Russia and Ukraine.
So that is exactly right. Right now, due to sanctions, nobody's really purchasing. I think only China is purchasing from Russia,
Mm.
and you can see that really drove the Russian currency into the and made their currency the strongest I think it ever been in history, pretty much.
Hmm.
And that's that I think that's what makes even my case a little bit stronger, um, just based on that
It's almost
information.
counterintuitive. You would have thought it would have just completely collapsed, but because it's being traded in yuan to Russian current to ruble, it seems like that strengthened their currency in a weird way.
Right. So right now they're really trading energy because they cannot trade in dollars due
Right.
to sanctions. They're trading in rubles, which made that currency very strong. Um, I do think that um, this does a little bit concern me also on the strength of the dollar, just because i- if they start, if other countries start following that path of trading energy and other trade other than the dollar currency, that can put the American market in a much larger uncertainty.
I think that's a accurate assessment of what some of the current threats are that are really vexing our current Fed policy, and so it's really in trying to guess what they might do next. It seems like it's tough to see any real clarity on what direction to go, and I'm getting a lot of input from the other side of the story that's saying, well, right now the Fed is really punishing Europe pretty severely because of the rate hikes and whatnot are really tough on Europe, and so I guess they're in for a really rough winter from what it sounds like.
Right. I think I was reading about a week or so ago that the British government is assuming that they'll lose about 10,000 people due to the cold winter, just because
Wow.
of lack of energy. In Germany, I was also reading that in certain areas they will not have electricity during the night,
Hmm.
and they'll stop the traffic lights. I know this doesn't even sound real. And here in the States, they were talking about a shortage in diesel fuel,
Hmm.
and energy is brought to the gas stations by solar diesel trucks.
Hmm.
So that could be a challenge, and we'll see where that shapes out.
That feels like a serious threat to the economy overall for sure.
Right. So the question is really what's happening with that. I don't know how much reserve the U.S. have, but that would be very interesting. I think, looking at it globally, this is just a theory. I don't know. I'm a guy of evidence. I'm a lawyer in trade, so
Yeah, right.
I cannot. This is just an assumption, but I would say that it does look like the U.S. was pressuring Israel to do a treaty with Lebanon on the energy pipeline that they
Hmm.
had going on over there, just because I think that the Americans really needed that energy and were counting to get some cheaper energy from Lebanon, rather than getting energy from Israel. Um, that's an assumption of mine, but
That's an
it is.
interesting aspect of the whole picture too. You see little nuances like that along the way, and then of course they've got the U.S. shale production and fracking, which is great in terms of supply, but then you also have the complexity of climate change and those who are interested in a transition to green energy, and it's a real just a multifaceted problem. And again, if I were a couple hundred IQ points smarter, I would propose a solution, but I don't know that I see any clear answer other than get get ready for more nuclear power. But I don't know if that's going to happen politically either.
Right. I do think, this is just in general. I think most of the world would love to go into cleaner energy,
Hmm.
just because everyone wants to live in a cleaner world. We
Yeah.
all want to live in a clean, We want to live in clean neighborhoods. We want to live in clean and green environment. So I don't think that, that would cross even party lines here in the
Hmm.
U.S. I know that this is, here in the U.S. it's a very divided country, but on that I think everybody would agree. However, if the world is really prepared for that amount of energy, creating that amount of energy
Right.
needed
And
to
and,
get
and
those
you,
stuff
you're
done, that's
driving at it right.
debatable.
You're driving at a really interesting point too, Moshe. It's everybody wants it, but what cost are you willing to pay and how fast? And I don't think that that's the policy. And again, I actually am I'm from Colorado. I'm a tree hugger at heart, probably. But having said that, at what cost and how? I mean, there has to be a realistic path to it, and it doesn't feel like this current path is sustainable in terms of a transition.
I strongly agree with you to this point. Right now, we're still not ready for that. Um, even if you look at the cars today um, that are electric cars, they're still fueled by energy, because that electricity comes from somewhere. Um, so, so yeah, we're still not there. We
Yeah.
are making a lot of progress, which is wonderful. And if we do look on the world on a deeper level, we do want to leave you know, we want to leave for our kids a better place than we lived in. But we're still not there yet. We're
And
still not at the
this is why
promised
I
land.
really encourage folks to check out the documentary by Bill Gates about nuclear power on Netflix. There's been tremendous advances in nuclear energy, and I think it's far safer than we have a mindset about nuclear power. And if we look at the safety evolution in terms of nuclear, I just feel like nuclear is an obvious answer, although it's probably not politically that palatable yet. So that's the one of those things that lawyers often see that others don't. It's like there's an obvious solution, but we don't think you're going to see the obvious.
So I think that's because politicians, and I think for both sides, um, do not always work for their constituents. They do what works for them.
I think
Um,
that's a fair statement for sure. I don't care what political stripe you have. You have to acknowledge that even though your guy might be your guy, he's probably working for his own benefit or for
correct.
his own
Politicians,
constituency. Yeah.
unfortunately, and yeah, I think that's the way the world works. No, it's always driven by different powers and different interests. If I do think that they came into Congress, Senate, and White House on good faith, yes, they do. Um, but I live in this world, and I know hybris is a real thing
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah.
Um, so we just have to be aware of that, and we have to know the reason I think it's also important to follow these things is because when you read between the lines, um, you can predict a lot of times the way the market will shape out. As an example, so this is a real story about a real deal. You know, in January, things were still going very strong. The economy looked very stable. Um, and I started working for a client of mine on a purchase he was doing in North Carolina. And we got him a few quotes. And one of the lenders was offering us this was a deal that had a CapEx component to it.
Mm.
And one of the lenders was saying, I'll give you at a rate of 475 for a full 5-year term, 75% of the purchase price, 100% of the CapEx. But the caveat was that they're going to charge 475, which in those days for that size deal, that was a little bit on the high end. And my client came back to me, and remember, this was going into February
Mm-hmm.
and later on into March. And then I was telling him, Alex, this looks like market is a little bit going to change.
Mm-hmm.
So even though there is bridge for 12 and 24 months, I would recommend, because if the Feds are starting to speak about increasing rates, so let's say they increase it in 1%. So you're at 415. If you're getting right now 315, you're going to be at 415 for 24 months. And then if you look at the points, origination, closing fees, and all the other good stuff that has with every closing, you'll be pretty much either evening it out, or the high rate right now will be even cheaper. And then they started talking about increasing more than 50 bips, and it's going to be even more than most likely 75 bips as we were going more into the process. Then he said, what, let me go add a lock in. I'll lock it in for 5 years at 475, because if the economy does go bad and there is an increase of 1.5%, I'll be at 5% and the takeout, and then I'll be paying the closing fees twice. And I was like, yeah, that's what you're facing. That's going to be the music you'll be facing. And interestingly enough, he signed that term sheet. We got that deal closed. The bank wanted to increase the rate a little bit just because rates were going already by that
Yeah.
time of the closing. That was
Yeah.
like, I cannot remember if it was already at May, but we were able to convince the lender to stay in the rates um, that we agreed on the term sheet.
Mm-hmm.
And today, rates are prime is at 7%. And that sponsor, each and every often he gives me a call and he tells me, um, you guys did a good job. And again, this is just for the story comes just from listening to the news, listening to
Mm.
the politicians, listening to the Feds when they're saying that they're going to increase the rates. So if you do know what's going out there in the market, sorry, if you do know what's going on and you pay attention to what politicians and what other powerful people in Washington are speaking about, these are things that make it a little bit easier to predict where we're going. So that's why it is important to speak about all the other things. One of this is another reason why I love real estate, because you just have to pay attention to so many little pieces. So when you're doing real estate, you're not only doing real estate, but you're doing so much around it. If it's in management and talking to contractors, speaking to lawyers, speaking to finance guys, you're speaking, to a big variety of different people, different class people. You hear different challenges, you hear different stories, you hear blue collar, you hear lawyers, you hear accountants, you know, you get a better perspective. And this world is just so rich with information that you can gather and, build a whole better philosophy if it's in business or in personal life or in different stuff.
Yeah. In Moshe, I give you a ton of credit, because amongst the folks that talk about the really geeky stuff, and I am probably the geekiest of the geeky, so I love going down these policy discussions. You're consistently one of the most common contributors that always have some insight, and it feels like it's a real competitive advantage for you, because I feel like you see the bigger picture than maybe most than in your space, and I really give you a ton of credit for that.
I appreciate that, but that's one of the things that make my job so much fun. That's one of the reasons I come into the office. A lot of my colleagues, they start their day with doing cold calling or responding to emails, I usually try to get to the office at about 7:30, a quarter to 8, just to read what's going on in the world, just to have like a half an hour, enjoy my coffee, read what's going on, open my mind a little bit, get a better understanding, perspective on stuff. When you do that, you get a better understanding. You can share the knowledge with more people, and and the bottom line is, in this world, knowledge is power. So when you have that, and you know what you're talking about, people appreciate that. They give you credit for that, and it makes our position so much fun.
Moshe, thank you so much for joining us today on today's podcast. What is the best way if folks want to reach out to you and learn about what their loan options are? What's the best way for them to reach out to you?
So the best way they can reach out to me is, I guess, either get my contact information from you, or they can find,
which will be down in the it will be down in the comments of the chat for sure.
So that's one way. They can look us up also at andar.com.
Okay.
And they can call me on my cell phone if they would like to consult or anything.
That's right.
I'm always happy. I do try to keep a window of time also for people who are new in the business, just because I remember how hard the steps were to begin with. That's why also charity is something that's very important to me to this very day, just because I was on both of the sides of the equation, and one of the things that I try to follow is to remember where I came from and what my mission in life is. So, if I was lucky to make it happen, yeah, it wasn't only luck, but also hard work. So just to spread it out and help others.
And I will say that Moshe has been very generous to newer entrepreneurs and plenty of other folks. I've seen it with my own eyes, folks. He's not just saying that. Moshe, it is a privilege to speak to you today. Thank you so much for your time today.
It is my pleasure, Doug, and looking forward to. I'm hoping to see you tomorrow.
That sounds good. I will definitely be there for sure.
Wonderful. Looking forward to seeing you then.
All right. Talk to you soon.
Thank you so much.
All right.